Welcome to On the X. My guest today is Bert Sorin, the president and co-owner of Sorinex exercise equipment. Founded by his father in 1980, Sorinex is used by elite military units, professional athletes, and top-tier training facilities worldwide. Before leading the company, Bert was a four-time All-American in track and field at the University of South Carolina, where he became an SEC champion and Olympic trials competitor in the hammer throw. After his athletic career, he turned his focus to building a business and culture grounded in authenticity, resilience, and long-term impact. He also founded Sorinex Outdoors, where fitness meets the wilderness, and community is forged through shared experience. Bert is also a mentor and builder, committed to supporting veterans, athletes, and the broader human performance world. So here we go with Bert Sorin on the X. So wind the clock all the way back for people that, I'm sure you've told this story a number of times, but for people that have no background on Sorinex, like you said, I think you've been around since about 1980, right?
That's 1980, kind of
the brand started. And started, as far as I know, just kind of reading up a little bit on it, started without making a gym. Like it wasn't a home gym equipment kind of thing. It was a college, right?
There was no really business idea behind it there. So originally it was Sorin exercise equipment, because we also had Sorin playground. So my dad started in 1980. I think he started the playground in 78. He was a physical education teacher to elementary school, was a weightlifting coach and a weightlifter himself. So we had Sorin playgrounds because he would work at elementary schools. They wanted playgrounds. They didn't have the money for it. So he's like, well, I could build stuff. Like, I'm pretty handy. And so he actually started by taking a school, and then he literally went out there and cut down the trees himself and fashioned the trees and the stumps and the rocks into like an organic playground, because they didn't have any money. So they used the resources they had. It was really brilliant, actually. You couldn't do it in today's world, although I think they should. Is he tied together the physical education program with science program and kind of like a pre-shop kind of program, and got the teachers and the kids out there to help build their own stuff. So there was ownership. Wow. And so they understood basic construction stuff. They understood physical education. They understood the science behind it. So like for 1978, that was really, really progressive. And it cost them, maybe $1,000 back then. It was very little, use. And that was what he kind of built his business of Sorin Playgrounds off of. But at the same time, he was lifting weights all the time. And since he was a little kid, and building equipment, and then some of the local high schools and churches and rec centers were saying, hey, could you build us a bench? Could you build us a squat rack? And so in 1980, he took some metal, went down to Owen Steel downtown and strapped it to the top of his Land Cruiser, and came home with a porta-band and a welder. And in our carport, started welding things together and saying, yeah, I think I could make that. He was a guy that, to make extra money, he said he got these big books that were basically the how to fix anything books. Mm-hmm. And when he was a teacher, he would put flyers all over the school of basically handyman stuff, like anything you need done, I'll do it. And so he said he would get a job, he would go home and read how to do it, and then he would just throw effort towards it and learn a new skill. So he just did that to the point where people said, well, can you build us a bench? He's like, sure, I can build a bench, because he was into it. And so eventually he was a teacher, Sorin Playgrounds, Sorin Equipment. And then in about 1984, 82, 83, he got out of teaching. He had Sorin Playgrounds and equipment for a while. And finally it was too much, but his heart was always in weightlifting. And that was probably his highest capacity that he had. He just had a mind for it and a love for it. And we went to Sorin Equipment, and that went, it started, like I said, very, very locally. Some people in town still have home gyms made by Richard Sorin from 82 or 83. Oh, wow. And it's pretty cool. So there'll be 65, 70-year-old guys will come to me. They're like, man, your dad made the coolest equipment. I still have a whole gym. There might be an old doctor here in town, and he'll invite me over to his nice house on the lake, and he still has a vintage 1982 Sorin equipment made by Richard Sorin, full weight room, still has the same cables, the same pads on it. It's wild. And they're like, yeah, I've had this since I bought it from your dad for $800 back in 1982 or whatever it was. So that's how we started.
What, so was all that stuff self-taught for him? Like he didn't attend some vocational school or anything? He just got books and taught
When he was
himself?
in high school, he was doing the vocational classes
Okay.
and always thought that he would, be a machine operator. He was from New Jersey, so that was kind of that area. It was, you're gonna get in the machine operating. Those are the good jobs, up that way. And he never took a college course, never expected to. That was just no one in our family had ever been to college. But he loved weightlifting so much. He was very explosive and very strong. And in high school, he got good at throwing the discus. And actually, he was one of the top rated recruits in the nation at discus throwing. So as he always said, he goes, I loved lifting, but I was good at throwing. And he goes, I was planning on working in a shop, and then all of a sudden, all these universities are asking me to come and throw for them. And he said, I never took a college prep course. I wasn't planning on doing it. So he goes, I kind of saw college as like this vacation. You go off and play at summer camp for a couple of years. And he ended up at University of South Carolina on a full ride as their kind of prize recruit. And he got down here in 1968, and they didn't have, first thing he asked, where was the weight room? And which is pretty rare for an 18-year-old kid to ask where the weight room is in 1968. And they said, well, you don't want to lift weights, you'll get muscle bound. And he was like, well,
Oh my
that's
God.
not accurate, because he came from a weightlifting background. And then when he moved into the dorm room, and they called the roosts, they had these concrete concrete walls in the hallway, and they would sit on the ground, and they'd sit back to back with their feet pressed against the walls. And they would, instead of like arm wrestling, they would do like a leg press contest. You just
Oh,
crush
yeah,
the
yeah,
other
yeah.
guy
Okay,
against
got
the
it.
wall, just messing around. Well, he could beat any athlete on campus, almost all the athletes with one leg, but he could certainly beat every athlete, football players included. And everyone's like, why is he so strong? He's like, because I lift weights. I do Olympic lifting. I do power. Like, this is what I do. And then finally, the school agreed to let him borrow a car and drive back to New Jersey and bring his own weights back down to South Carolina. And they gave him a room at the student center. I mean, this is wild. As a freshman, they gave him a room, and they gave him a few $100s to go buy wood. And he built the first weight room at South Carolina as a freshman in college. And he was like
Wow.
their prized bull. So they were like, yeah, you do whatever you think you need to do. And he was like, okay. So he brought his weights, Bill's weights, and then he recruited the other athletes on the track team to come lift with him. And so he was actually coaching them while he was an athlete there. And then that, people started getting stronger, and that was before they had a strength coach or a strength program.
Did,
And pretty wild. But he saw so far in advance and was not going to take what everyone already thought as gospel. He was going to use his brain and go, well, then why is it that I could jump higher than everyone and I'm stronger than everyone if this is so bad? So that was kind of the humble beginnings of it.
did nobody, I mean, man, I was under the impression that people were lifting weights, but did nobody lift weights back then?
Not really in college athletics.
Okay.
It was very, very rare. So you had weightlifters, which were Olympic weightlifters, snatch and clean and
Yes.
jerk. And that
Yep.
was what he grew up in, because he was in New Jersey with York, Pennsylvania, and the York Barbell Club. That was the golden era of American weightlifting. Well, it was the start of the Cold War, so the Russians kind of took over, and that was kind of at the advent of drugs. So that whole thing kind of changed during the late 60s. And then you had the hippie movement, so people weren't really into like
Yeah.
weightlifting. And he was that kind of straight edge guy that's like, hey, I'm not going to smoke weed. I'm not going to smoke all the time. It's like, I'm going to go lift 4 days a week because I really love it. That's what I love. And that's what he did. And so he ended up becoming a physical education major, and designed the first weightlifting program at South Carolina, and then ended up writing the state curriculum for all the high schools in the state, and became a teacher and ran the gymnastics and the weightlifting program for the entire state. In 1980, he got taken to Nigeria to train the Nigerian Olympic team in weightlifting and track and field events. And so he was like international, basically diplomat, going over there and stayed in the jungle for a month. And he said that almost killed him. But that was kind of like the early beginnings of Sorinex. And it was just a guy that really, really loved strength and knew things that he could make, or felt that he could make things better than they currently were, and wasn't willing to take everyone's word for it, what was needed. He was like, well, I think I know what's needed, and it's be stronger. So,
Man, there's so much out of that story that I love. There's the piece about just going all the way back to the beginning. There's a piece about getting the school to, and all the people, like the faculty and the kids, to help build the stuff, which I think is so awesome. And you're totally right. Cool. Like, we probably couldn't do that these days, but what a great thing. Like, what an awesome thing of community service, of like, okay, you're going to have an investment in this, whatever this is. So you're going to feel a sense of ownership of it. So you're not just going to want to destroy the thing if you're a kid or whatever, you know, like you're going to feel like you're invested in this. I think the highlighting of, certainly, I think in our school system is really good about still the arts and things like that, but I don't know that they do a lot of the vocational stuff anymore. And that's another thing where I feel like the more our country has gotten into just like school is about academics, and there's all these other things that maybe it doesn't need to be in that school, but like just the value of that, of learning to work with your hands, even if you're not going to become a carpenter or a welder or something like that, knowing basic skills. Look, I kick myself
and
to
hard
this
work
day.
and just, and we built something together. He was always a guy that wanted to, let's lead. He was his natural leader and his natural salesman. So he sold everyone on the idea, like, this will be our playground and our weight room. And if we all chip in and we all do things together, we could have something that not everyone else has. And then actually the district had him again write the protocol on how other schools around the state could do a similar program and utilize their resources the best. Like, one story you'll like. So he said one of the problems was they had this field in the back of the school, and he went and got these big concrete culverts and rolled them in there because they were cheap and they could play on them and the whole thing. He said, but the whole playground was filled with these rocks, just where Dutchford Elementary School was. It just had a lot of rocks all over the ground. Well, of course, the kids were picking up rocks and throwing them at each other because they're kids.
That's what kids
do.
He
said, you know, you get kids every day, you get schwacked with a rock and whatever. And so they became a problem. Okay. Which I thought was great. So he thought about it. So he took 3 tires from the tire shop that he got got old tires, and he hung a cowbell in between them in front of the woods behind them. He just hung them there, and he spray painted them gold and painted the tires red. And he said, within the first hour, the kids pick up the rocks, they start throwing it at the bell because they want to hear it go ding, right? And the backdrop is the woods. And he said within a year, all the kids had really good hand-eye coordination because they all sat over there and zinged rocks at the bell. And he goes, we ran out of rocks because they threw away all the rocks and they all landed in the woods. And so he's like, so we got them free to clean up the entire playground of the rocks, and everyone was really good at throwing. I was like,
that is brilliant.
Brilliant.
And he probably didn't even, the beauty of that is he probably didn't even have to say anything.
No, he just hung them up there. And
just hung them up, and they figured it out.
Of course, they would go out there and they start having games, and and he was like, I'm a PE teacher, so that's a overhand throw. The kids made up their own scoring set. He goes, I don't care, as long as they're just out there being active. And he goes, the best part is they're not throwing rocks at each other. They're doing it safely. They're getting better at throwing, and they eventually clean up the parking lot.
I got to figure out a way to implement this same idea, like with my kids cleaning up their rooms. Right? Like I got to come up with something like that, like a target for them to throw their dirty clothes at or something. That's a really good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. It was really cool. And I just always appreciated stories like that. And then, even up until recently, 50 and 60-year-old men would come by our HQ and big smiles on their face, or like, man, your dad was the best teacher I ever had. And he got me into this. I've been a welder ever since, or I've been in this, he taught me in it. And these are men that Pops hasn't seen since they were 9 years old. And the guys are still coming over saying, no, the best teacher I ever had was Richard Sorin, 1979 in 5th grade. And he taught me how to lift weights. And then because of that, I still lift weights, or my son still lifts weights, or, and Pops laughed too. He said, the first state championship that our hometown ever won in football was the year that all of those kids were seniors in high school. He goes, well, they were doing snatches and clean and jerks at 5 and 6 and 7 years old with broomsticks. All of them knew how to move. They knew how to work. He said, so they were just a physical group of kids. And he goes, it was cool seeing 10 or 15 years later, they were all best in the state. So it
Yeah.
was cool. That's what always made him tick, is just bringing people together and getting the most out of them.
Yeah. I mean, the other pieces of that I find so awesome is the personality traits there that I think are so important with people. It's the problem solving thing. Like, hey, there's a problem. I am going to figure out a solution. I'm not just going to
Yes.
sit and wait. I'm going to be proactive about it. And the inquisitive nature there, to the curiosity of just like someone saying, yeah, you're going to get muscle bound or whatever. And it'd be like, am I, like, really,
And why am I not?
yeah, like, well, that doesn't seem to jive with my experience. So I'm not sure you're right on that,
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
he used to always say something he taught me years and years ago. He says, look at something. How does he say it? He goes, look at something for not for what it is, but what it can be.
yeah, right.
And that was just problem solving. That was program implementation. That was coaching. That was, look at the kid for who that kid can be. Don't look at him for who he is. Look
Yeah,
at the
love it.
potential and tie into that. And so we would play games sometimes, like we'd go out to eat and we're eating lunch or whatever, and we would just pick something off the wall and he'd go, okay, give me 5 uses for that thing that aren't what it is.
Mm,
And, that was just a game that, since I was a little kid, we would play. But I would honestly say that directly played in super heavily to Sorinex and the development of myself and design, because looking at complex problems or simple problems, and then you're coming up with, using the neuroplasticity to come up with a different vantage point of what this thing can be. I mean, I've seen him so many times, and I actually do it now too. If I go out in the weight room, I'm trying to redesign something or fix a design. Sometimes I'll just lay on the ground on my back and look at it from a totally different angle. Because literally sometimes you'll just see different things from a different vantage point.
yeah,
And I would go out there and then he would just be laying on the 65-year man, just laying on the ground. Like, what are you doing? He's like, just thinking, just looking and thinking. And
yeah,
then he would just
love it.
come up with something and you're like, where the heck did you get that from? He's like, well, and then it was just, so I learned a lot of that is just, don't take what everyone says as the answer. Just keep digging and digging and digging. And if you're truly interested in something, you'll find a different answer or a better answer eventually.
Now, at what point did this become like the thing for your family, the family business, where it was like, this is what we're doing. We're all in on this thing.
Well, I would say in the early, 84, 85, he went total Sorin equipment. And my mom was still a teacher. And, so, I mean, he wasn't making a ton of money on it. He was making you know, enough to be hooked to it and get by. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, at one point in 1986 or 87, I mean, he had to sell his house just to fund a job for University of Kentucky. And he needed to buy the steel for the job because that was going to be our breakout job that like put us on the map as a contender and as a custom builder for a university. And he believed in it enough where he sold his house, used the money to buy the steel, and then rented his own house back from the landowner,
Wow.
from the landlord, just to say, okay, like, because I believe it's worth it. And
Yeah.
that's where I started talking to some, other entrepreneurs and stuff like that. I'm not saying it has to be that difficult, but in my opinion, if you're not willing to do things like that to get your dream off the ground, then I'm not saying that you're better or worse than he was. You're just doing it differently. But, when you have someone that'll go after that hard and never quit, um, eventually wins come to the table.
And were you still building this all? Actually, let me back up. What was this like for you growing up? Like, at what point were you kind of? I mean, obviously there's a mentorship from your dad, but the
Sure.
business aspect of it, the point where you were, and like, what were you doing athletically too? Like, how did that kind of shape your
Yeah.
athlete journey?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my mom and my dad were divorced. So I lived with my mom, saw my dad every Wednesday and every other weekend.
Hmm.
And so, I just remember that early time until I was probably 12 or so, Pops was just super busy. He was always tired, always stressed, always dirty, and just running 1,000 miles an hour because he was still just trying to he was building the stuff himself. He was delivering it. He was selling it. He was designing it. He was trying to run the books. He was still lifting weights 4 days a week. Still doing, outdoors pursuits, hunting, fishing when he could. I mean, just rarely ever slept. And so I just remember like, dude is just tired. He's stressed out and he's tired all the time, but he just got after life at full tilt. So that's just how I saw my dad back then. And then as I got older, I mean, I wasn't an athlete per se. I did all like the little league soccer and,
Yeah.
beehive soccer and crap like that. But I wasn't super athletic, and because I didn't live with dad, and dad was always busy, and my mom, I just lived in a neighborhood. So I was like a skateboard kid and just, goofing around doing that stuff. And then we moved out closer to the lake. My stepdad got out a spot out there. And so I was fishing all the time. And I was the kid that from, March until September, I didn't have a shirt or shoes on. And I was like living in the lake or in the woods. And I was just Huck Finn. I didn't have a
Yeah.
lot of schedule of framing. I was just the little kid that was out there. And so when I was, I think in 8th or 9th grade, I started lifting weights with my dad more so. I'd played around with it. And I was lifting weights, and I was okay. I wasn't good at it. I was skinny. I was a late bloomer, very late bloomer. And then one time I asked dad, I said, hey, I'd like to, I have Christmas is coming up, and like, I don't know how to make money to buy Christmas presents. Like, could you give me some money? He's like, I'm not going to give you money. He says, but he goes, I'll pay you $5 every time you work out in here. And he wrote the programming. And so I was like in 7th or 8th grade. He's like, that'll be your job. And, some people hear that like, man, you shouldn't have to pay a kid for that, this and that, and the other. But probably a few $100 into it, I ended up making enough money to buy everyone nice Christmas presents. And then I started loving it because I realized that if I go 4 or 5 days a week, that's like 20 to 25 bucks a week. And for me as a kid, like that was a ton of money. And I thought I was getting this great deal. And my dad laughs. He's like, that was the best deal in the world for me. He's like, because I got to train you with full compliance, and I fell in love with it. And he's like, you became eventually my partner in Sorinex because of the money that I put into investing in you at the time. So I thought that was a really smart way to do it. But that's when I started falling in love with more so strength. And I threw the discus in high school. I sucked at it. I wasn't an athlete. I was again, undersized and undercoached. And that really wasn't my thing, but I ended up going to the University of South Carolina just to be a regular student. And through this crazy turn of events, I ended up on the track team there, much like him, but just, I wasn't recruited. I was a shitty walk-on that no one wanted. And it was funny because the movie Rudy had come out like the year before. So it was basically like Rudy, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm a relatively likable guy, so the people on the team and the coaches liked me enough, but I was like, they would send me to go pick up all the ice and the water, and I had a car, so they would send me to pick up the good athletes that didn't have a ride, and I would be like the chauffeur for all the good athletes, and they would just use me like a manager, basically. But I was fine with it because what I was doing is I was working out, lifting, and hard lifting 4 days a week, and I was seeing these massive changes in my body. And so everything that I viewed as valuable as an athlete, which I always thought were cool, and muscles and strength and masculine prowess, all the things that I wanted were just on the other side of really, really hard work. But because I was on the track team and I had walked on to like probably one of the track team dynasties of the throwing world of college history, unknowingly, I just happened to be the right place at the right time where failure wasn't an option. Like it was the no-fail mission. I just didn't know it. So my body changed exceedingly fast. Like I put on 30 pounds my first semester in college, which,
Whoa.
yeah.
Were you taking some kind of supplementation too, or was that just working out
What
for
I
you?
realized, my mom's a little person, and so she eats very little, and I live with her. So I just got used to not eating a lot. And so, but I realized I was kind of always hungry as a kid, because we all are. So I was 172 pounds when I got to college, trying to be a walk-on thrower in the SEC, which is just laughable. At 6'2", 172. And that was in August.
That's thin.
And thin, right? And by August, that was in August. And by December, I was 6'3", 200. So I'd gained 28 pounds and an inch in 3 months.
Yep.
And so, but it was kind of a little story. So I was packing up, getting ready to go to home for Christmas, and that was before cell phones, and so you like kind of didn't know what you looked like. You know, you see your face in the mirror every once in a while when you brush your teeth in the dorm, like whatever. And I remember I was standing on a chair getting something out of the top of my closet in my dorm room, and I looked over and there was a mirror across the dorm room, and I could just see from like here down to my knees, and I was in my underwear, and I remember like looking over going, whose legs are those? And I was like, holy that's me. Like, I look like that now? And I'm like, oh my gosh, but I gained 30 pounds, you know,
Yeah.
of muscle. I was still 7% body fat. So it was like, I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then I was like, oh my gosh, all that work that I did in the last 3 months, like I am turning into what I always respected, but never knew I could be. And that
Mm.
was like that little ignition that it was like, after that, it was Katie bar the door. And then so I ended up having a good career in college, and went on to be a professional track athlete for a few Olympic trials after that, and just chase that dream. But like that first semester was so big for me to truly fall in love with human performance and hard
Yeah.
work. And there's really, if it happened 100 more times, I don't think it would have happened that way again, just because so many weird Forrest Gump like things had to happen for me to end up on that track team. So I think it was meant to be. It doesn't make sense now that I see it. At the time I was too stupid and too ignorant to realize that it was kind of an impossibility.
Mm-hmm.
But that was kind of what really tied me into saying, yes, weightlifting is the way, strength is the way, human performance is wildly addictive and interesting, and something to go after with you know, some real force.
Yeah.
So that's how I
The
got
uh
into
the,
sports.
the story about paying you for working out, I think is great, because yeah, I'm sure there's, whether it's child psychologists or just people in general, they'd be like, well, that's a terrible thing to do. Like, you shouldn't have to do that. But I implemented something very similar inside my family around grades when my kids got good grades, but I wanted to kind of show them like they're capable, like what they're capable of
Yes.
in that regard. And so I implemented something, this was years ago, where it was like, hey, if you get a 4.0, I will give you, I'm going to put like a prize in an envelope at the beginning of the semester. We're going to set that aside, and it's going to be like, it'll be a surprise. It might be a gift certificate. It might be money. It might be like trip to the movies or whatever it may be.
Love that.
And if you get a 4.0, this is what you'll get. But I have 3 boys. I made it so it got increasingly better the more of them did it. So there was a team incentive too, right?
Yeah,
It was
that's
like, hey,
awesome idea.
if you do this, you're doing it not just for you, but for your brothers too.
Yeah.
And
Really.
again, I'm sure someone could pick that apart of why that might be a bad thing to do. But in my experience, it was great because it worked. It gave them an incentive to work for. And the whole point of it was it taught them, like, if you want this, you can do it, right? Like, and it's all about the effort you put in. I'm giving you this little extra incentive, but that eventually went away.
Of course.
And it turned that thing on in their mind to say, oh, I am capable of that, right? Like,
Exactly.
and I thought it was a valuable tool, you know?
It's
So
100% a valuable tool. And I would say, did they turn out successful?
yeah, I mean, this is the point, is
There you go.
my middle son, he wants to be a college athlete. And
Right.
so he's a soccer player, and he realizes the value of, like, if I
Mhm.
keep getting 4.0s, that increases my odds of more schools I can go to, right? Like it just helps me on my journey. And it's switched on for him, where he's like
Yes.
committed to getting that now for his own
Yes.
growth, right? And
Yes, exactly. And eventually I told dad, you don't need to pay me anymore. I like this.
yeah, right,
And so
exactly.
it cost Pops a couple $100.
Yeah.
So basically burnt, and he laughed. He's like, we've made millions off of that few $100 that I invested in you. Cause if it wasn't for me at the time, he wouldn't have had a partner, a successor, like someone to be with. Like,
Yep.
and so he laughed. He was just like, wow, that was the best investment I ever made. But what he also was always trying to teach me in the economy, and again, some psychologists could say this is good, bad, or indifferent, but his whole thing was, he was always trying to teach me the economy of, if you do above and beyond what the what the standard is, if you do above and
Hmm.
beyond and perform well, your life gets better. If you don't, your life gets worse. There's no
Mm-hmm.
staying in the middle. So yeah, if you want to just sit at home all day and play video games, I'm not going to tell you not to. You just won't get to go on cool hunting trips, fishing trips. You know, you're not going to get cool stuff. You're not like, fine, just be a schlub. Or if you do all of this stuff, the world is your oyster, and the better you get, the more comes your way. And it was an economy. And he taught me that really early on. So I just started realizing, not in maybe so many eloquent words, but what I finally oriented my mind to, if the expectation level of our life, if it's like a graph, if it's this line, and that's where maybe my contemporaries, my teachers, my genetics, whatever the perceived expectation is, the more times I could put a data point above that level, exponentially, the better my life always seems to get.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's all I had to learn. Once that happened, it was, then it was, I went from a no one wanted me, didn't make the state championships in high school, walk on that shouldn't have even been allowed to walk on, to eventually, and I had a 1.9 GPA my freshman year in college, to Dean's List, President's List, 4-time All-American, SEC record holder, and 2 Olympic trials by my 5th year.
Yeah.
So all I had to learn was, if you put forth more effort than everyone expects, or try to outwork everyone in the room and be strategic and really try to find every little edge that you can to win, things get really, really good.
Yeah.
Things get really, really good. You get a bunch of awards at banquets, and you get to go, you're getting all these cool things that, the Oakley guy shows up at your hotel room and gives you sunglasses to wear on the podium when you're at NCAs and you're 18 or 20 years old and you don't have shit, but man, this guy's giving you a $200 pair of sunglasses. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, this whole thing is great. And then, like, you're bigger and you're stronger, and it's much more fun to win than it is to get 12th place. And like, all these things happen. And to learn that economy, that period of my life taught me that economy. And that's kind of what I built the rest of my life on.
On the X is brought to you by Mechanix Wear. Mechanix Wear gloves are kind of the go-to glove, I think, for most people out there, whether it's working around the house or on the job or some kind of tactical setting. That's certainly been the case for me throughout my life. And they've made a whole bunch of improvements to the gloves that they have out there. So they've got the kind of original series here with the Velcro backing, Velcro close that most people can use in sort of everyday settings, very ubiquitous for various things that you might want to do. Then they've got these fast fit ones, which you essentially just slide on. There's a little loop there around the wrist where you can pull them on. And then they've got the Impact series, which has a reinforced backing to protect your knuckles. And then they've got this lock ring reinforcement around the thumb now, where there's a lot of wear and tear. There's a whole bunch of other improvements to these, and if you go to their website, they literally have a 5 to 7 minute video about each one of these sets of gloves and all the improvements they've made, from the material, reducing the seams, making them more reinforced, making them more moisture wicking. It's clear that they put a lot of care and attention into their gloves, and if you listen to the guy talk on the website, they really love gloves, and I think that that comes out in everything they do. When I'm going out to a hardware store and I'm looking for some gloves, I almost look at everything else as just kind of a cheap knockoff. So definitely my go-to glove, highly recommended. Mechanix Wear gloves, they're available at most retailers on mechanixwear.com and GSA Advantage, and they're proud to offer an exclusive 15% off discount through the ID.me program to military veterans and first responders. So check them out. This is why I'm such not a fan of praising talent or putting emphasis on talent. I can't stand it. It's just like, talent is a thing, but it's a relative thing. It's like everybody's more or less talented, meaning having an innate capability towards something of certain things. But I just find that it can limit you. If you believe in sort of the myth, I guess, of talent, it can limit you in what you want to go do or might do.
Right.
And we put way too much stock and trade into it, and we praise people for it, which makes no sense. It's like praising them for being tall or something like that.
Yeah, they woke
like,
up. I woke up.
Yeah, it woke up that way, so you didn't do anything. And just, it's like, the people that work the hardest are the people that make it in things. Now, granted, if you're going to be an Olympic gold medalist, does talent play into that? Yes, it does, of course. You know, like someone like Michael Phelps has natural abilities and physiology that helps him, but he still worked his ass off in a pool to make it there.
Absolutely.
You know?
And that's what I learned watching the other athletes on my track team. I started seeing a pretty obvious curve. The folks with the highest talent mostly work the lowest.
Yeah,
and
right.
the guys with the lowest talent work the hardest. But what I found was that that put them all in about average.
Yep.
And then the guys that had low talent that didn't work hard, they got kicked off the team because they sucked.
Yep.
And then there was a few guys, my roommate was one of them, another kid on the track team, like that had a high talent and a high work ethic. And one of them made 3 Olympic teams and 7 NCAA championships. And the other one made 2 Olympic teams with 2 Olympic medals.
Yep.
And you go, there's the recipe, right?
Yeah,
like you can find rare air people that have the talent, but work like they don't. That's that.
Yeah.
But otherwise everyone ends up right in the middle.
Yeah.
And then they just trade places on the day, right?
Yeah. So on the business side of this thing, did you grow up wanting to, because this is a family business, did you want to take over the family business? When did that come on the radar for you?
Well, when I fell in love with strength conditioning and human performance in college, I was going to school to be a teacher. To be honest, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I actually just like hunting and fishing and goofing around too much as a kid. So that was what I wanted to do. And knowing that wasn't going to pay the bills, but you know, I didn't really have much of a driver. And then when I started getting good at track and field and strength conditioning, I was interested in it more. So I shifted from the teaching track to more the business track, not wanting to get into business, just wanting to be around strength conditioning, human performance, and to reduce stress for my dad. That's all it was. It was, I hate to see him stressful. I think I could help out. And so I just came on to Sorinex as just a helper. And so I graduated. It was kind of funny. I graduated and I got to my last NCAA championships. And I said, okay, and Pop's like, well, you want to work here? And, you know, and as a kid at 14, 15 years old, I was working in the shop, doing the crappy jobs, chipping BBs and cutting steel and doing all that kind of crap. But he goes, do you want to take a shot here at Sorinex? And I was like, well, yeah, I would. I didn't know what I would do. I just want to help him out. And so he said, okay, well, you can start anytime you want, as long as it's July 1. Okay, well, and I looked at my watch and I went, okay, that's 2 weeks from now. So I had like a 2-week vacation from school. Like I had a 2-week screw around, go on the lake and everything. And then I kind of joke with people. I said, I clocked in July 1, 1999. I haven't clocked out since. And so the first day I got there and just, Pops goes, okay, here's how you establish margin based on cost. I go, okay. And then he gave me a whole list of numbers. He goes, tell me what the retail on all this would be based on cost. And so I'd have to just keep doing the mathematical equation and, just little simple stuff like that. And it was like walked into the gym and we broke down every piece of equipment knowing, I knew most of it, but just what different styles of tubing and hot roll and cold roll and all that stuff. And then we would go to the shop and I would relearn how to build it again. And it was just the first year of just do all the maintenance jobs and the crappy jobs and the, all that stuff. But it was interesting about the first year I made a sheet. I gave it to Dad and laid it on his desk and it was entitled, "These are the things that I think would move Sorinex to the next level."
Cool.
After being there. And some of them are like hilariously simple, but he was an older guy and he built it from nothing. And so like one of them was get a dedicated fax line instead of like every time, like if someone tried to fax and he was on the phone with the customer, the fax would come through. And I was just like, hey, if we got another phone line, maybe that would be helpful. He's like, good idea. And then it was like, what if we got a mail service so I don't have to go to the post office every day? He's like, okay, good idea. And so like literally it was that low level. And so, it was some other things in there too. And so I literally taped it to my wall and he goes, okay, well then get those things done. And so I would just use that as a checklist of things that I thought would make us more efficient or better. And so you're building out travel boxes for the installs and like all these little things. And I just sat there and checked them off all year. And that was
What
kind of
year
like
is this roughly? What time frame are we talking about?
1999.
Okay.
99, 2000. And at that time, I was still training for the 2000 Olympic trials for the hammer throw too. So I was
Okay.
5
How big was
o'clock.
the
I was
how big was
becoming
the
a
business?
professional athlete.
How big was the business
Like
at these points?
revenue wise,
I mean, I would think kind of all of that in terms of revenue, in terms of employees at this point, right? At some point, it goes from
it
just your dad
was,
making equipment.
well, at that time, we had gotten out of the production ourselves and we had a
Okay.
local manufacturer actually building the stuff to our specs. And so Pops's office was probably, it was in a commercial gym. So he had a deal with a commercial gym locally. So we put all the equipment in there as our showroom. And then they gave him an office space that was probably 17 by 20 feet. So that was Sorinex headquarters,
Okay.
was the commercial gym, which is called Irmo Sports Gym. And then I had a subsequent office, which was probably the same size. So our total square footage was like 800 square feet was with Sorinex. And I remember when we did our first $1 million year. So we had been in business at that time from 1980 to 99, 19 years. And I think we had never cracked $1 million in a year.
Okay.
So not saying that's good. I'm just saying that like it was a labor of love, something we enjoyed. And we just like building equipment, like watching people get strong. And again, $1 million is different back then than it was now.
Sure.
But, we were building 2 or 3 big jobs a year, what I would say like a big university job.
Yeah. So talk about your primary clientele, because it sounds to me like it was basically you were like building full gyms. There wasn't much of a direct to consumer, I'm going to buy a couple dumbbells type of thing.
There were, I mean, we were still doing that. I mean, I remember the first sale I ever had was $727 to a guy for a chest supported row machine.
Okay.
That was my first big sale,
Yeah.
and, so it was cool because I had a bunch of my buddies from the throwing world and kind of fans of mine were like, they knew I was in the business world, so they would support me. They'd try to buy a couple $100 worth of stuff a year. And I was utilizing my resources that I knew people from the track and field world and the training world. And so those people were some of my early customers. And so some of them were a $50 this or a $200 pair of shoes, Olympic weightlifting shoes, or some of them might be $100,000, gym for University of, let's say, San Jose State. And so I think we did that one in 2001. So that our main business has always been B2B. It has been like larger industrial style clients, some professional, private gyms, some military installations, Naval Academy long time ago.
Oh, right on. It's my alma mater, man.
Yes. Yeah, and there you go. So yeah, when
A lot of gyms like all of the naval, because there's like, I don't even know how many gyms at the Naval Academy. There's a lot. There's like,
that was back when there was the football gym.
The football gym,
Academy.
yeah.
And then we did another
Which
one
is, let's be clear, the nice gym, right? Like the football
nice gym,
team always has the nicest gym on any college campus because that's where the money is.
Yeah, revenue sports. But that was like 97, 98. Like, so we were doing stuff there.
When I was there. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, Mike Brass is from Fish there. So anyway, that was kind of where we were, and then every year we would get what I consider 2 or 3 big jobs, which were 6 figures or more. That was a university of wherever. And, of course, a lot of effort was going to the gestation period of designing that room and the sales associated with it and the visits and the whole thing. And then but it was 2 guys. Sorinex was 2 guys, Bert and Richard Sorin, with about 800 square feet of space. And we hired out our manufacturing to our specs. I mean, that was what we were for a few years. And then I'd hire a guy that, maybe a hammer thrower that I threw with that I needed an assistant and he had nothing to do that summer. And I'd hire him for whatever. And he'd come and help me. And so a lot of my friends early on were just guys that our number 3 was like always a buddy of mine,
Yeah. That's how it goes.
Yeah. You know how it works.
Yeah.
And then eventually we started probably 2007 or 8, we started hiring people we didn't know as much, but there were still people we knew from that world. And then we started building the team, I would say 2010, 11, 12. That was when we were building more of our team. And I want to say in 12, we got back into manufacturing ourselves. That's when we realized that although our partners that were manufacturing for us were good, they weren't as driven for growth as we were. And it just took us a while to like understand what we were working with. And I had to realize that at 30 years old, we could trickle this along and continue this super slow mom and pop style growth for lack of growth, or we could go really after it and really try to change the industry with designs that we just brought to the industry, which were the rig design, four-hole design in racks, rack accessories, safety straps. Like those were all stuff that we came out with in that 2007, 2008 time period. And so that changed the industry. And then we kind of realized, hey, we have a little bit of we did not have a pole position in the industry. We just had an in. We had changed the infrastructure of what was acceptable within the industry enough that we just went, we laid the hammer down after it. And we said, okay, well, let's go after this and try to develop really this whole brand and really turn this thing up. And that way, we'll either be on track of where we want to be within 3 years, or we'll be out of business in 2 years, but at least we'll know and we could go get real jobs. If, we're still young enough to go get real jobs. But my fear, what I realized at around 30 or 31 was, if we don't get hyper aggressive with this whole thing, we're going to be 45 and wake up and we're still going to be doing the same thing and never really take our shot.
Right.
And so I had 7 people that worked for me at that time, and we had the conversation on a Friday afternoon. I said, I think we have a unique position in the industry. I think what we're doing is special, and like we're all young enough, we could go get real jobs if this doesn't work, but let's not find out until we're older. And I said, we're gonna be, like I said, close to where we want to be, or at least on track in 3 years, or we'll all be out of business. We're going to run it into the ground in 2, but you have the weekend to think about it. If you show up on Monday, I assume you're on the boat, and we're going to burn the ships behind us. And it's kind of tell your wives, girlfriends that you're pretty much paid for the next 3 or 4 years, and don't think about going anywhere because we got a lot of work to do. And everybody showed up.
Nice.
So, and then we kind of still didn't happen as fast as I'd like to, but we were able to go on a pretty good tear. And it was just being aggressive and kind of not playing it always safe like we had in the past, and just burning the gas and getting after it. And then when other people start getting after, they start getting that same feeling, like let's guerrilla warfare this thing within the industry and go. And that was when that hyper growth happened.
Talk about innovation specifically. You mentioned some of it in there, but what are the things that you as Sorinex have brought to the table that weren't in existence before, that have been real deal makers for you too?
Well, you've probably seen the landmine. I mean, the landmine was never meant for sale. It was meant to help me attempt to make the Olympic team in 2000. That was a invention Pops and I made that was just, it was going to be my secret weapon.
Talk about what that is for anybody who's not
So the
familiar.
landmine is like a steel base on the ground that has a universal joint and a pipe and you shove a bar into.
Yep.
You can do all types of rotary motions. So that was me being a hammer thrower saying, I want to convert my power clean and my squat into rotary force, and invented the landmine. And then once you get that, you start really realizing all the other things it could do. And I would say that's probably one of the most copied pieces in the industry in our generation. So that was a 1999 thing. Glute ham roller was another piece. You see like a little frame with 4 wheels. You do everything with your hamstrings. Yep. So that was another one that my lead designer was getting into weightlifting. I suggested, hey, you to understand this stuff, you need to start lifting weights and I'll help coach you. And one day he asked about something that could be utilized for hamstrings. And I walked by a scrap bin and I just pulled a bunch of pieces of steel out of the scrap bin and some wheels, and I put it on this table. I was like, weld this together and I'll show you. It just, one of those things that just thought would work.
Yeah.
And that's probably our best selling piece of all time, numbers wise.
Hmm.
And then in 2007, 2008, CrossFit was starting to come on, and people would ask us about these pull-up rigs, and they were welding all these crazy pull-up rigs together in their gyms and all this stuff. And I was out at dinner one night, and it was like, I kept thinking, I was like, it's so dumb that everyone keeps welding all this stuff together in place, is you can't paint it. If your business grows, then you're going to go to a bigger facility and you have this welded in place thing you got to come and cut apart. And so I drew up on a bar napkin a series of uprights and a series of cross members that could bolt in anywhere. But of course, to make it work in all directions, you had to have holes on all four sides. And so I put the holes originally 4 inches apart with 9/16 holes, 2x2 tubing. And the goal was, because the war was cracking off pretty good back then,
Hmm.
and I wanted to put something that the American military could easily pack on pallets and ship all over the world and build like hyper customized gyms wherever they are, and they don't have to throw things away once they're done. Because I was reading stories and talking to guys and the teams and other stuff. They were like, oh yeah, we had that, but then like we had to leave, so we just buried it in the dirt. Like they literally tell me they just buried stuff in the sand. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. So I designed the base fit, which was the first rig system, intentionally for the CrossFit community, but for also the military. And then going back to my physical education days, I said, well, gosh, this could be something that could be sold to elementary and middle schools to start that early presidential fitness kind of start for physical, physical culture. But then it could also be used for gymnastics work. And so there was this big framework behind where I thought it could be used. And actually I took the first one, the first base fit rig, to the CrossFit 2 games in Aromas in 2008, to Castro's ranch.
Yeah.
And I put it up at the ranch. That was your Kalipa one. And yeah, so actually I ended up giving Tony Budding, Tony Bauer, and a couple other, and then Castro, I think Castro's brother, and a couple other dudes basically took the first rig ever that was ever in the public. They took it and kind of broke it off and like kind of all bought it from each other and everything like that. And then,
Okay.
and then that was at the ranch for a while. And I remember showing up and setting it up, and it was kind of funny because the CrossFitters were like, they're looking at it like, some of the people got it, but a lot of people were going, well, I need a pull-up rig. I go, well, it is a pull-up rig, because the idea was that all these rigs were everywhere, but then they would buy squat stands. I said, well, if you have the uprights already there, if you have
Right.
holes in them, just make them 4 feet apart and you got squat stands everywhere. Why pay for the steel twice?
Right.
And then
Yeah.
if you have pins with bolts, you could put plate storage wherever you want. You could, it just gives you, it's a Picatinny rail of the exercise world.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of fun watching people the first day. They would go, I go, well, it's a, and I would tell all the stuff it could do. And then they would go, do you sell squat stands? And I go, all right, let's go back to what, and so I had to learn how to kind of sell it and go, okay, am I not making sense, or is it just kind of a little too new? But that all being said, that was kind of the start of it. Then, then other companies started taking the similar approach to it, and other companies popped up. And
Yeah. So talk about that, because you mentioned like people knocking things off. I'm curious about this. Are you able to patent these things? Can you protect yourself in some way?
Yeah.
Like I was talking to Jack Daly and Randy Hetrick from TRX yesterday.
Sure.
We were talking heavily about patent, because again, that original suspension trainer, someone can easily rip that off, and right. So you got to spend
I
a
know
lot
they've
of
had
energy.
a lot of people they dealt with on that.
Right. So how does that work for you? Because this is fascinating to know. I did not know that these ideas were kind of yours, because I think certainly in the CrossFit world, people think, oh, Rogue came up with all that stuff, because they sell it, right? They sell that same stuff. You're grinning in a way of like, yeah. So, I mean, talk about that. Like, are you able to patent some of this stuff? Can you protect yourself?
Yeah, we have probably a dozen or 2 dozen patents now.
Okay.
Back in those days, we were young. I was more interested in making really good equipment than really being a business guy and dealing with patents. And then kind of when I ended up dumping a bunch of money into trying to patent that product line. And, to be honest, I was young and we were right at about the time that was probably going through the appeals process when I probably got the patent. I just ran out of money. I
Oh,
just said,
wow.
I put my life savings into it. I was like, I can't put any more cash towards it. I got to get focused on sales, then focused on litigation crap and stuff. So I just said, bail it. I just took the whole thing. I threw it in a file cabinet and I just kept designing. And,
Okay.
and then there's some companies maybe, that are out there that, they just said, well, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of them. I mean, and I used to get really pissy about it because I legitimately think it was kind of the rack system that shaped our generation of
For
like
sure.
how racks are done.
Yes. I
And so
completely
there's a
agree with
part
that.
of me. What's that?
I completely agree with that. Yes.
I mean, every company has some version of a rig now,
Yeah.
like every company.
Yep.
So there's a part of me that's still like, anytime you have financial stresses or struggles, you're like, man, that'd be really cool if we were the only guys doing that, or if I got a royalty where every time someone did that. But from a self-preservation standpoint, I've just had to go, you know what? I learned, and it's a good piece. I haven't missed a meal in a while. We've been successful. And maybe by everyone doing it, we kind of gave that technology to the world in a way unknowingly. And I do think it's a better way to do a rack system. And some other companies have come out with some cool stuff that kind of works off of that system. And hey, if I die tomorrow, at least I know I made a difference in the environment and the community that we love. And I have to leave it at that, or I'll just get pissed.
Yeah.
So
That's a
okay,
healthy
well,
mindset. That's a healthy approach. Do you have to roll? It's we're
no,
coming
I'm
up on
good.
time.
No.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll go a little bit longer.
Yeah, whatever you think. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
whatever's
yeah.
helpful.
No, a couple more things. So where are you guys at now? Just in terms of where Sorinex is, you now, what are we talking? 45 years into
45 years. Yeah.
existence, right?
45
Um,
years.
what's the present look like from, just a business perspective? But I know you have some outdoor stuff now. Like where else are
Mhm.
you going? And like what's the ultimate goal too? Like, are you just kind of like, just keep going with the family business? I mean, I always think this is interesting with business owners because look, these days people get into business just to sell their business, right? Like,
It's interesting. I've had people ask me that, like, what's the exit plan? I go, I never thought of it. I never
mhm,
thought of an exit. Like I saw myself as signing on for life when I signed on. Like,
mhm,
this is what I do. I like inventing things. I like the community. I like leading our team. I really, really enjoy designing things that don't exist. I like changing the face of the strength industry. I know we've done it multiple times. I enjoy doing it. Um, are there days sometimes I'm like, holy crap, I should just sell this. This would be way easier. Like, like that has crossed my mind. And would I ever? I don't know. Maybe that's not the goal. Um, I like it. I like my guys. I like my team. I like my coaches. I like my customer base. They're my people. They're the people that I grew up competing against and learning from, and them learning from me and my community. And, so that's kind of where we are. I still enjoy it too much to walk away from it. Now, if someone decided to put a number out there that would make that a much, much, much harder situation, my wife would probably have a couple conversations with me on that
yeah,
one too, to not see me come home stressed. But that's where my mindset is. I enjoy it. I love what we do. I lost my dad last year, so there's still a part of me that, feels like, you know, I want to keep. I told him I would come on to help him, and I feel like I've done that, and
mhm,
I did that, and I feel like me being on the team helped us grow and helped, and we had a wonderful relationship. And I think we did some amazing things within the world that we both love. And that's the strength world. And his goal of getting into the strength conditioning business was never to make money. It was to be relevant and to help in the world that he respects. You know, it's almost like a war fighter. You know, probably the goal is to make a difference, save lives, protect freedom, and to go do some rad stuff. And most guys I talk to, that's kind of what they're about. They weren't like, well, you know, when you become a E14, you make 93,000. Like this, whatever, right? I don't. Hey,
That's
I'm making
very
up
true.
numbers, right? But
Yeah.
the guys that are war fighters, they're war fighters because they believed in war fighting. And I believe in this, and I enjoy this. My mindset is this. So, does that mean I'm going to change at some point? Maybe. I'd be open to the conversation, but right now it's for the last 25 years, I got up every morning and did what I do, and I come in here and do this. And so it's what I do. It's what my team does. So, you know, we've grown significantly. We've taken a pretty good bite out of the industry as far as like retail space or whatever people might say. Like we've done, I believe, a pretty darn good job with colleges, pro teams, Olympic training installs, elite military organizations, private spots like, you know, and for the Navy SEAL Foundation. You know, I think we've done a good job. My
Yeah.
goal is to do a better job. I still see, like everything, right? An after action report of any kind of operation. You knew you could do some things cleaner, you could do things better, you could develop it a little cleaner. And that's fun. That's fun for my guys and I to sit down and try to unpack it and hot wash it and do a better job. And so that's still very, very enjoyable. Most of our business comes from other businesses of that size. Do we still do work for individuals? Sure. We do them all the time. We do home gyms. We do onesie twosies. We'll work with anyone who chooses us, but we're very, very set up and really good at large facilities. That's where we kind of differ within the industry. We're not an internet company that's more of an IKEA based. Hey, it's going to be black. It's going to be mass produced,
Yep.
or even worse, brought in from China or brought in from some other company. Like the equipment is made about 45 yards that way from where I'm sitting right now in our facility, and about a mile that way of our other facility. And we walk through there and we look at this equipment and all the time, and we get our hands dirty, and like, that's what we do. And that's not for everyone. Some people, they want something that's maybe a little less expensive, a little less intentional, maybe quality or innovation isn't on their highest piece of priority. And there's definitely brands out there for them. And I feel the brand that we've created is, we're very intentional who buys it. And if people feel that that's for them, then we're there for them. That's
Yeah.
kind of where I see the business side of it.
Yeah. Perfect. I
Thank you
think
for the
we'll
time,
end
though.
there. I
Sorry.
think that's a great message to end on. So, um, Bert, thanks for coming on, man. I really enjoyed talking to
Thank
you.
you.
This was fascinating stuff. Obviously,
Thanks,
I
Griff.
love your equipment. The build out, let me emphasize, the build out you guys, or the build you did for the West Coast Warrior Fitness facility is just
Oh, it's
top
so
shelf. I
sick.
mean, that place is awesome.
It's so
And,
nice.
and there's, I mean, and that's directly impacting hundreds of guys that are going through that that program every year. So it's killer, man. I mean,
I
like,
appreciate that. And just one thing I'll say is, you know, we do a lot of colleges and pro teams and all that. And as an athlete myself, I very much enjoy that. I very, very much enjoy watching a national championship game or a Super Bowl and going, hey, those really big, strong athletes, you know, we maybe play a little part in that with our tools.
yeah,
But a lot of my heart is with the military community, because I know that the stakes are higher in the game. And it moves me to my core when I see folks getting put back together and getting held together and getting much more viable and functional on the field of battle, that helps our country stay strong and to stay in the driver's seat in the world, and give my kids and my wife opportunities in this country for freedom. Like, that is so close to my heart. And I'm absolutely thrilled to get to work with Navy SEAL Foundation. I'm also on the GWAT memorial board where we're actually choosing the location of the GWAT memorial that's coming to DC.
Oh, very
We got
cool.
that pushed through Congress. And so there's some amazing stuff coming in that regard. And so like that is a big part of our hearts and who we are as a company. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying before, like, would I ever sell whatever? Well, if I don't get to do that kind of stuff anymore, I don't know. Like,
Yeah, right.
I enjoy these conversations. I enjoy living life with extraordinary people. And in some ways, kind of like we always realized that the Sorinex was the cover charge to get to do that.
Thanks for listening to On the X, the official podcast of the Navy SEAL Foundation and an Ironclad original series sponsored by Mechanix Wear. Learn more at NavySEALFoundation.org or text On the X to 60104. Please like, share, subscribe, and if you have a question or feedback, drop it in the comments. See you next time.